Hello, hello. Welcome back to Detection at Scale. Today, I'm really excited to chat with James Nettesheim, who is the CISO at Block. James, welcome to Detection at Scale.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jack.
Maybe we start with a quick background. How did you get to where you are today? How did you get into security, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go all the way back to the beginning to start. I sort of started off in the computer field as a network administrator working for the US government. And as part of this, I traveled overseas. I worked in Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany. And, a big part of our role was hardening of the systems, firewall administration, some other aspects like that, seeing real world attacks as part of that, and really piqued my curiosity in security. So when I went back to do my master's degree, I did a focus in computer security and slowly transitioned my career fully over to that while working for the US military as well. So continued working overseas for a while. During that master's degree and as part of the journey, really sort of became extremely focused in detection and response and forensics and incident response in particular. So eventually came back to the US and worked for the United Nations doing computer forensics, sort of more traditional investigations, but missed the intrusion space a lot. So from there, transitioned to Mandiant, where I really got to work some of the coolest, large incidents out there in the world, and eventually transitioned over to Google, where I led incident response worldwide, and finally came here to Block, where I've sort of been on the journey of running security operations, and then became CISO a couple years ago. So it's been a fun trip overall.
Yeah, and let's talk about Block. So Block is doing a ton of interesting things in AI. And I think famously, Block co-designed MCP with Anthropic. Block built Goose, which is a just a general purpose agent as I understand it from the outside. But all of the folks at Block are using Goose to be more productive, push the company forward faster in its mission. I'm kind of curious, like what the inflection point was to go all in on building your own agent, and then also building MCP.
Goose definitely started out internally as sort of a passion project by a few engineers and by our CTO at the time, Donji Prasanna, who was really looking for sort of an unlock in the agentic AI space and really unlocking it for not only our developers, a lot of solutions out there really focused on developers, but how could we build a sort of general purpose agent that could be used by the entire company? So they started developing it, obviously had the strong partnership with Anthropic when they were developing the model context protocol. And they both sort of matured together overall and really, quickly demonstrated how powerful these tools could be, both for developers. A lot of developers are using Goose, both within Block and external to Block, but also for, general purpose use throughout the company, whether it be performing analysis, helping do sort of deep research, automating common tasks with recipes and things like that. And then the model context protocol just, obviously exploded and really Goose sort of became a reference sort of implementation platform for that. And it really just showed the true power, how you could connect it to so many different systems and really, unlock a lot of automation across the company overall. And we've contributed Goose to a recent announcement to the Agentic AI Foundation, which is an open source foundation under the Linux Foundation. And, model context protocol is part of that. Goose is part of that, and it really shows sort of our commitment both to you're sort of developing in the open with open source, which I think is really important. We have people throughout the world that are able to use Goose connected to any LLM in the background that they want. So it's not vendor specific there, but also unlock a whole world of implementation with all the MCP servers that have been built.
And how is Goose evolving as an agent?
So it's definitely evolving. We still use it internally a lot, but it's also, fully open source and we're committed to that development in the open source area. So it's it's both evolving from like the more powerful integrations with MCP, but we're also able to drive some security improvements in it. And one of our areas of research has been in prompt injection defenses within Goose itself. So, think of it, it's very easy to trick LLMs. It's hard for LLMs to differentiate between data and commands. And it's very easy to trick them to perform malicious instructions. And we've actually done some red teaming in this space that we'll be releasing a blog post on where we're able to implement sort of hidden prompt injection attacks within Goose recipes. And this led to us really doubling down on hardening it and performing some both deterministic sort of detection of prompt injection attacks, but also we're experimenting with sort of adversarial AI concepts where think of if you have another LLM reviewing the commands and context provided to a different LLM, and it can provide sort of a verdict or a judge with that as well. We're also seeing that lead to better outcomes in code gen and areas such as that. It's a little slow at times, so that's something we're working on because it definitely needs to be a solid user experience too.
Like all ML development, everything's going to get cheaper and faster over time, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So this idea of hooking an agent up to everything in the company could probably be a little bit scary to anyone listening. So like how did you roll this out in a responsible way? How did you get comfortable with this concept? And it's obviously led to a lot of success, but talk me through that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell folks that there's a huge risk in not adopting this technology as well. Obviously being a CISO is, a constant balancing of different risks of the company and trying to make sure you're taking what we like to call a block principled risks, where we think it's worth taking the risk and it's in a good pursuit of, solid technology and our mission of economic empowerment overall. And one of our principles is autonomy at the company. And along with that comes automating a lot of the work we do and providing tools so that really anyone at the company can be a builder, not just software engineers, not just designers, not just product managers, but anyone at the company can be a builder with these tools in their hands. So it was clear that we needed to take this principled risk overall, but we wanted to do it safely. Obviously, we have a lot of sensitive data. We process a lot of sensitive information, payments, etc. So what we did is we evolved some of our earlier practices. We have something called data safety levels here at Block, which is it's loosely modeled off of sort of CDC bio-contamination levels, where depending on how dangerous a pathogen is, you have to treat it, in clean rooms or things like that. We have it similar, like the more sensitive certain data is, the more securely it needs to be stored, processed, handled, and treated. And we evolved that to create our own sort of Gen AI security principles as we were adopting this. So we were making sure we created an accelerated path for review and approval of these tooling, but making sure it was still getting that very thorough review in collaboration with what sort of data it's processing, what sort of activity it can take on, and what sort of trust we will put in it. And so we've kind of created these security tiers where we have security principles, and we blogged about this too, where if you're going to be processing or performing this sort of activity, here are the security principles you need to implement, and sort of going up with security constraints as we dove into it overall. And that allowed us to both move fast while maintaining a high security bar overall for our use of it. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns in this space, so we're staying on top of it with things like weekly stand-ups with my teams to make sure we're both securing our internal use of it, securing how we're implementing it on our products, and securing how we're contributing to it with different tooling throughout the ecosystem overall.
Yeah, I love that principle you mentioned around autonomy. I think that's such an important and really common principle right now in the field of AI, right? Everyone is trying to move as fast as possible with agents. We're seeing companies like Anthropic just ship really important features every single week with agents. So that flywheel is definitely working. Let's sort of shift gears a little into detection response. So this idea of autonomy, this idea of anyone can be a builder, that was really woven throughout the blog posts that we had worked on together with Panther and MCP, where the whole intention was for Block's security team to use MCP with Panther and other security tools to accelerate section engineering and like broader jobs of the SOC. Like, how has that materialized since that blog came out? And like, what learnings do you all have since then? It's been about almost a year at this point since we wrote that.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite blog posts, and it was one of the really early success stories where we were able to collaborate with, a strong technology organization like Panther and release an MCP together overall, and it had my favorite logo in it. I think it was a panther riding a goose overall at the time. It's morphed into a really powerful sort of principle we have now, which we call democratizing detections here at Block. So similar to everyone being a builder and everyone can build software, now anyone at Block can write detections to use in Panther, to use in our other detection and response pipelines. And they can do it with the help of AI, and they can do it with the help of Goose. And they could do it much quicker than they ever would have been able to before. Before we were using Panther, we had a homegrown sort of SIM solution for a while and would require modifying 9 files and, it took like, high on-ramp experience. But obviously with the power of Panther and the MCP and the integration with AI, we've been able to create these recipes and these playbooks to where anyone can sort of with natural language now say, hey, I have this data source. I want to start performing detections against it. I have this expertise, and they can start writing these detections and commit them to code all by themselves. And we've had external contributors to this area already,
Hmm.
and we're really bullish on this overall. I think in 2025 we had maybe 40% of all of our new detections were created with AI assistance. So it's really sort of that flywheel is building momentum overall. Obviously, you still need a high bar. You can't create noisy detections and with a lot of false positives overall. But we're able to say that AI is sort of step zero in our process now. And a lot of the tuning we do is also using AI. So someone writes the tool or the detection overall, but then we're able to use AI to tune that at the same time so that it gets better over time and writes tests and things like that too.
Who have you seen jump more into detection writing now that you have this democratization? Because obviously the security team and the detection team specifically within that are the ones who are looking at all the threat models and detections and the alerts and kind of in that world every day. Like who have you been able to branch out to in the broader organization to help write these detections?
We definitely have some folks in our Bitcoin space who are building products and looking for interesting activity and really have, an extremely high bar for security, obviously, like in this space. So they were some of the first folks to reach out and, both ask hard questions like, how are you making sure you're not overfitting some of the work you're doing? I can talk about some of the AI analysis work we're doing overall, but also saying, we have some work we're doing to make sure we're protecting our customers properly. And this seems like a great way to advance their sort of detection and trust and safety capabilities overall.
And then how do you think about the sort of like capturing that tribal knowledge, that specialization in the agent itself? So obviously, as we want to empower more teams, is this the idea of a Goose recipe to where people can encode that specialization, or have you seen that be successful so far?
So we're doing it a couple different ways. We definitely have Goose recipes where you can provide a lot of that context upfront for Goose so it can perform a lot of the analysis. We're also we've created a tool called Binary Intelligent Triage that essentially has taken all of our historical detections and alerts and investigations that have been documented, say, in our platforms overall, and it's stored, it's performed analysis and it's stored that in a vector database overall that we're then able to use to perform sort of LLM-based analysis, new alerts going forward. So it's basically able to take these thousands of alerts, perform semantic type analysis based on it, and really lead to really strong results. And we're then able to plug that into our playbooks where it can take automated actions and perform automated analysis overall too. And this is important to me to sort of fight fire with fire. Obviously, attackers are going to use LLMs and agents to perform attacks. Anthropic's released a lot of research recently in the threat intelligence space where they're seeing it happen end to end, from reconnaissance to actual post exploitation activities too. And so we really need to automate and increase our ability to both perform analysis, but the automated response at the same time overall too.
It's a great segue into talking about autonomy. So I think I read a quote from you saying that agents need to be provably safer than humans. What does autonomy look like at Block? Like where are you all on that scale and how does it really vary based on the job to be done?
We're definitely leading with one of our core principles as autonomy. That being said, we still have a high bar for when we still want a human in the loop overall. So we're extremely bullish on adopting agentic coding, agentic analysis, and things like that, but we still require PRs to have a human reviewer at the end of the day right now. And we were very critical in making sure that if you're using an agent to code, we've connected a BROAuth to your internal identity at the company so that it is showing up as you writing it overall and that you're responsible for that code still at the end of the day. So that we're avoiding the idea of like, oh, the agent just wrote that. We don't know who wrote that and who's responsible for it at the end of the day. It really sort of drives home the message that the humans running these agents are still responsible for it. Now, that being said, we do have agents. We created something called Headless Goose, which is an interesting picture when you think about it, but it's essentially a headless version of Goose, or a CLI version of Goose, essentially, that is integrated with a framework that can hunt through PRs, Jira tickets. It can perform, say we have a vulnerability scanner that has identified some vulnerabilities. It can read the output of that, try to perform the fixes automatically, even write the PR for you, but a human's still responsible for pushing that code at the end of the day. I do think as an industry, we're going to need to continue to figure out ways to when do we trust the agent enough to operate completely autonomously? And that's something we're working at overall. And I think it's similar to the Gen AI principles I outlined earlier, is like in these circumstances, they're operating on this sort of data and these sorts of systems, we're more comfortable with it. In our Bitcoin cold storage systems, we're probably not going to be comfortable with it for quite a while. We're going to really want to make sure we have those humans involved for the entire time.
What about in the flywheel detection response? So how are you thinking about autonomy on the response side? Because there's a lot of steps that you need to take to validate that something is in fact good or bad. But talk me through what's been working there.
Yeah, I'd say with that binary intelligent triage system we've had like almost 99.9% efficacy with the decision it's made as part of it, which has given us a lot more confidence to start taking action based on it. It's it's still not to the stage where it's like taking, like action of locking your account or something like that, but it definitely will perform a lot of the automated analysis actions for us where, it'll look at previous tickets or playbooks and say, we typically query this sort of data, pull that data, add that to context, run the next tool call, perform some more analysis, and decide if it thinks it can make a decision or not at the end of the day. But humans are still reviewing all of those too. I do think we're getting closer to the stage of obviously we've always auto closed tickets, whether it be with deterministic automations or LLM based automations overall. So that's obviously happening. But anytime we're going to take some more direct action, it's going to be escalated to an analyst for approval right now in general. That being said, what does the future hold here? It absolutely will be with autonomous actions and then output escalated to a human to review to make sure that we're comfortable with what was done there. But we'll continue to have a high bar for anything that would take sort of drastic action in the space overall.
So let's pivot into talking about the future of the SOC. So I think this is a topic that's on a lot of folks' minds in terms of where things are going to land, in the next 5 to 10 years with an army of agents alongside security professionals. So I guess the question is, if you're building a security org from scratch today, like what do you think would look different in this like AI native realm?
It's a really good question. I've rarely ever actually even called my detection and response team like sitting in a SOC because I think it's really led to like it comes with these concepts of tiers within SOCs, and you have a tier one, two, three sort of analysts or responders. And I've really always performed to just differentiate it between the type of work people are doing. So you have a detection team who are writing detections, triaging detections, and then you have a response team who are doing more longer horizon or longer time frame analysis. And that's how I've tried to divvy up the work primarily. And you have people of varying levels of expertise and experience in both sides of those. And neither side is necessarily more technically competent than the other, but they collaborate a lot. I think I think we'll continue to see, what I find interesting is, higher level programming languages didn't lead to less software, it led to more software. And I think to a certain extent, using LLMs is another higher level way of thinking through this space. We don't need detection analysts who need to learn some sort of domain specific language anymore. They can work in the English language, but we still need solid analysis and architecture and understanding of complex technical systems that we built to understand how all this fits together and to find the intricate detections that need to be built and to monitor those and to keep up with the attackers who are pivoting and operating, one step ahead of us a lot of times with new technologies as well. So I think we're going to see less need for very specific tool expertise overall. I don't think you're gonna have as many resumes that say, "I'm an expert in this very specific, security field or this specific detection tool or this specific response tool," but I think you're going to see that sort of body of expertise still really be needed overall. So, we'll see we'll see sort of an elevation of thinking within the detection and response field overall, where they won't necessarily need to be tool experts. They're gonna need to be domain experts still, but I think there's gonna continue to be a strong need for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And the foundation models are just so smart at being that middle layer in between a DSL and what the analyst is actually looking for. The biggest blockers of that end up being like available context, available permissions to go reach into other systems, et cetera. So I guess, do you see a world where agents will be autonomously triaging and coming to conclusions? Like, how far do you think, and if you agree, how far do you think that is from now?
Good question. I definitely see a world where agents are acting autonomously and coming to conclusions and making decisions in the detection and response space. I think it's how or when. I think part of me occasionally thinks we're going to have some plateaus in this space where we have elevated capabilities, but it's still not a full autonomous solution. But that being said, this is moving faster than anything we've done previously, I'd say. So I think it's on the order of, I don't know, I'll give myself a big thing like 6 months to 2 years or something like that, that we see a lot of it starting to happen overall. I don't necessarily think that means we have less people needing to do all of that work. I just think they're going to need to be experts in a different way sometimes overall too. And that I am anticipating sort of a large ramp up in attacks in this space as the attackers onboard all of this. So I think it'll be using these tools to keep up with a lot of those attacks still.
It's a scary but also exciting thought, you know?
It is extremely scary but exciting. I think we all get in this field because those sorts of, you know, concepts are really exciting to us too.
Yeah. One of the hardest things about being a security person is just having to understand this intersection of so many different practices and knowledge. So, even to do detection response at a company like Block, you have to understand the infrastructure. You have to obviously understand all the various business units and sort of everything there. And the thing I'm most excited about is just the layer of AI being able to help translate all of these and also to customize the analysis per organization. Like that's probably the biggest unlock. And then I think the glue ends up being the security team's judgment in how we can either encode that knowledge into the agents or kind of like you were saying, have humans being responsible for the final decision. I think that's a really strong principle that will continue. But yeah, it's really amazing to see, after a field that's been very highly manual for so many years. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to things continuing as well. On the topic of open source, like where does that desire for open source come from at Block? Is it from Jack? I mean, I assume it is, right? He's the CEO.
Jack is, a huge believer in open source technology, and it really starts with sort of our mission of economic empowerment overall. And we're really trying to build financial tools for everyone and to empower everyone to be able to fully participate in the economy, and open source is a key aspect of that overall. We've obviously built historically open source software and will continue to really be large contributors to that in general. And I'd say it just fits our ethos, providing tooling that is impactful for the whole world to use. And I'd say our secret sauce for a lot of the success as a company hasn't been because of closed source software necessarily. It's been because of our ability to scale and empower folks to use that software and to do things they didn't think they could do before. If you go back to the founding of Square overall, we were trying to give vendors and people who didn't have access to take credit card payments that accessibility and that ability to participate in the economic world in a way that they couldn't before. Like a lot of folks were missing payments because people only had a credit card at, say, a farmer's market or at an art sale or something like that. And they would miss out on the ability to further their business and to participate in the economy because they didn't have that capability. And we were able to provide that capability in a very smart, sort of innovative way. And that's led to a lot of the different things we're building as even today. So I think it'll continue to be a huge part of our ethos of working in the open, sharing what we know with the world. And it all comes down to that economic empowerment mission.
So what are you excited about for this year when it comes to AI and security?
Well, that's a good question. I'm very excited for the generative, code gen space in general still. I do think it's getting more and more powerful, and I'm seeing more and more people able to build software without even having to necessarily look at the code that much at the end of the day. I think for a while we were seeing, you could build broken software very easily, but still building working software is really hard. And that's still the case today. But I think that it's getting better and better every single day. So I think we're going to just see a lot of do very interesting software being built across all sorts of different parts of the world. Now that said, from a security standpoint, I'm very curious how we're going to defend all of this space and how we're going to scale with it, both accelerate the innovation here, but also provide those proper guardrails. So I'm really excited about seeing how we use those tools at the same time to both provide detection and response capabilities, but also to implement sort of preventative frameworks so that we can operate safely in this space overall. And from a very tactical standpoint, excited about like seeing automated dependency upgrades, automated bug fixes in software, fixing bombs, in automated ways. You know, there's a few different companies out there doing sort of AI based or LLM based pen testing and red teaming. Really excited to see how that advances over time and how it's able to, how advanced it's going to feel when we're seeing things do this. Like I think like you said, our careers have been largely manual in a lot of ways, and we've always been pushing for these huge unlocks with automation, but it's never felt quite there. It's always been close, but it still doesn't quite deliver on this promise of automating ourselves into a new world overall. And I think we're getting closer there with AI overall.
Yeah, the biggest gap there has always just been human judgment. And
Mhm.
it's hard, right? I always give this example of someone downloading a bunch of files at like 2 a.m. Right? When you get that alert, there's like 10 questions that you have, and it's just impossible to codify that in traditional automation. It's like, oh, well, like you just have unmanageable software at the end of the day. So just the fact that LLMs are able to take even little pieces of context and just expand on them so much. And the models have gotten so good at that chain of thought and the reasoning. And I'm just really excited to see where that goes, especially when it comes to speed because we obviously don't have a lot of time to waste when it comes to detecting and responding. So as models get cheaper and faster, like what we saw with Gemini in December, innovations like that are really promising. And I think for you guys, because Goose is so agnostic on the model layer, like that must be an advantage, right? Like, do you find the team sort of switching to the best model for their use case? Was that the intention with it being open or one of the intentions?
It was definitely one of the intentions with it being open was to not constrain ourselves. Any month there could be a new best of breed model for a specific task. And in Goose, it's much more of a general purpose agent for you. You can use it for code gen, you can use it for research, you can use it to write a document if you want, you can use it to analyze a Slack thread and give you the biggest output from it. I occasionally have it hunt over all of our Slack channels just for a security sentiment score and tell me like, are people complaining about security or what is the biggest like thing that they're bringing up most of the time? And I was able to do that very quickly or much more quickly than I would have been able to do before. So it's absolutely a principle of ours, and it goes back to that open source sort of principle too. Like, not everyone has a lot of money to buy a lot of tokens or credits with some of these newer frontier models. But if you use things like Open Router or other areas like that, you can find really good, much cheaper models that folks can use. And we're seeing it be used in a lot of different ways in places that, don't have, a big tech company budget to spend with some of the larger companies overall. So it's been a huge aspect of that overall too.
That Slack pattern you mentioned is super interesting. It's been really top of mind for me as well, because oftentimes there's like a one message from an engineer in Slack that will explain a big downstream of things that we saw on the security side. Like, do you see that as kind of like an untapped or sort of emerging process where we're connecting the messaging and maybe even like emailing tools into the security tooling to kind of like triangulate all this behavior together? Like, where else does that go?
Yeah, I think we're still experimenting in this space, but to your earlier point too, like the best incidents that I've ever worked or the most interesting ones or the most difficult to find have been when an analyst or an engineer pulled on one little thread that wasn't obvious at the beginning of the time, and they kept pulling and they eventually unraveled this very interesting incident at the end of the day. And I think we're gonna start seeing LLMs and agents sort of provide that glue or provide that sort of context for us and pulling out some of those threads or nuggets for us to work on. I think we need to be careful with it because it also occasionally can get that sentiment wrong, or obviously they hallucinate at times too, and just flat out make things up that didn't actually happen. So we're definitely not wanting to over index on it, but I think it's a really interesting space of research of hunting through areas that we're never really going to fully have a human look at. Like we don't want humans reading no human can spend the time hunting through all these even public channels and reading things. But when you can combine them with this sort of smart agent who can make decisions and other tool calls and look at all of these different data sources, I think it'll be a huge unlock eventually too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as long as the AI isn't also writing all the messages.
Yeah, and that's where like it helps to have that adversarial AI at the same time, maybe because yeah, you could have a world where when AI is just writing all the messages, you could have a world where it's just AI agents talking to each other and creating a bunch of work, which would be an interesting outcome too. So I do think we'll have to be careful with the implementations of things like that.
Yeah. I'm curious to see, personally, I'm curious to see if agent to agent becomes a little bit more mainstream this year. I mean, it's always a challenge to get everyone to use the same standard of like sharing. And obviously, we've seen that security for forever, but I'm really excited about that idea and the proliferation of more MCPs and actually starting to connect the agents to the MCP servers a little bit more directly. So I think that that's a huge unlock for cyber, just because, I like how you phrased it, like pulling on a thread that wasn't obvious. It's so true. And that really ends up being the key to solving a lot of this. So
And to really get to that autonomous world, we need the agents able to securely talk to other agents and to trust that this is happening in a secure way. And A2A seems like a very promising framework for that to me. And I'm excited to see that further get developed further as well and hope it becomes more of a mainstream standard that we can rely on overall. And we're going to try to see what we can do in that space also.
awesome, James. This has been an incredible conversation. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Would love to wrap up with three pieces of advice for other CISOs that are kind of in the mix of this AI transformation or wanting to support their organization that is moving fast with AI.
So three pieces of general advice from CISO to CISO. I'd say the biggest advice is like let's talk to each other. I think we're all in the same boat. We're in it together. We have the same mission overall, and you know, multiple minds are better than one. So none of us should feel like we should completely go this alone overall. I think we should leverage openness and open source overall too. Let's work in the open together. Let's share what we're doing overall. And then I'd say final piece of advice would be, you know, create principles and share those with your company overall. I'm finding most people, I'd say I'd be hesitant not to say almost everyone I talk to wants to do the right thing. They want to implement this securely. They don't want to misuse data or misuse systems access or anything like that, but they're always not sure what to do. And if you provide them those open instructions and a place to go for advice, you'll find that a lot of people are willing to follow and do it securely if they can overall.
Awesome. James, thanks so much. Where can folks find links to like the research and the blogs that we talked about? Like where are the best resources that Block has out in the open on this stuff?
So we definitely have engineering.block.xyz, which is our engineering blog for Block, and we're posting all of our blog posts. We'll post our red team output where we've sort of pen tested with prompt injection and Goose recipes there in a little bit as well. Hopefully, by the time this is released, it'll be out there. But also our Gen AI security principles, our announcement of the Agentic AI Foundation. That's all on our blog post up there.
Awesome. And the MCP server that we worked on is called MCP Panther. It's on GitHub. It's open source. Again, really, really grateful for that partnership. The project has been adopted by a lot of folks since then. So it's great to see. It's great to see a lot of people build their own agents on top of these MCPs as well.
Last call out would be, yeah, we absolutely have an open source GitHub repository as well. Would definitely highlight looking there for Goose and other things that we're building out in the open.
James, thanks so much. Great to have you on.
Thanks a lot too, Jack. It was a lot of fun.
And to get more episodes, go to detectionatscale.com to check out some of the work that we were chatting about. You can go to panther.com to learn about AI and MCP and SecOps. And yeah, chat with you all soon. See ya.